This is a brand new super lightweight carbon frame from Lightcarbon. We're going to build a super light e-bike. So just want to go through a couple of things quickly. So we've got the Lightcarbon frame,
which is the LCE 930.
and I know you've done some work on carbon and carbon repair and all that stuff. So in a minute, I'm going to ask your opinion on it, but it's a lightweight e-bike frame with 150 travel. And I'm actually curious to how much it weighs, because
Frame only then.
yeah, frame only with the linkage.
What are we at?
2.87 kilos, which is not bad. That's not super light. To give you a comparison, I think the Orbea Rise is about 2.2, but I don't know if that includes the linkage, and there's quite hefty alloy linkage on there.
Yeah, not to mention all the other motor mount bolts and various other parts. We've got an axle on there. So again, they will all add little bits of weight. But as a total frame weight, it's really not bad.
It's not bad, is it? And then we've got the super cool, compact looking Bafang M820 motor that is, what's the newton meters on this?
I think that's 75 newton meters on. Yeah.
75 newton meters. And this is not as big as a full power motor in terms of the physical dimensions, but it's not as tiny as like the TQ.
Yeah.
But in terms of have a look, the size and the build of it looks really good for 75 newton meters for a super light e-bike. That's
huge.
That's not far off a full power, is it?
No, I think you'd consider that a full power about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
How much does it weigh though?
Well, I don't know actually. So let's have a look. So pop it on there. So that weighs 2.28 kilos. So that's about half a kilo lighter than a Bosch 85 newton meter.
Yeah.
But it's 75 newton meters. So
yeah. So how heavier than say a TQ, but like a fair 500-600 grams lighter than probably your most other comparable full powered 85 plus newton meter motor on the market at the moment.
Yeah, and it's only a few hundred grams heavier than a TQ, which is the lightest, isn't it? But yeah. 75 newton meters. Although I have to say that newton meters and watts and all that stuff is not until you actually try it that you can really validate that. It's difficult to, on paper it's easy to write a spec, isn't it? But in reality, like we all know that 50 newton meters isn't equal amongst
it's
motors.
Quantifying it with numbers makes it a lot harder, but arguably you're not going to be able to get another motor brand that would fit one of these frames.
So this is bespoke for this frame. So it's a 150. We're going to make a bit of an enduro build out of it. So it's going to be a 150 rear, 170 fork. But I'm intrigued in your opinion of the frame. So we've just got it out. So take a look at it and see what you think of like the layup and the quality. I know you've got your little microscope.
Yeah, I do, which helps me have a look and inspect on the carbon. But I mean, from an initial view, you can feel the wall thickness. It tapers quite nicely, so there's no sudden edges. There's not much swarf, and swarf is just like the excess stuff that's left over of the carbon inside the frame. Normally, even you get sort of air pockets from where it's settling and the resin sits, and there's next to none on this. So, I mean, it's got a very clean finish. And I'd say, it's comparable to most other main brand sort of carbon frames here.
We hold it up and just show the camera just under there. So it does look very, you can see a bit of paint overspray, but you get that on all carbon frames.
Exactly.
So, I mean, when I looked at it briefly inside I can't tell any difference between this and a high-end frame that you'd get from anywhere else. So
arguably, I've seen more swarf and things in a high-end frame. So the quality and control and the finish on this frame seems to be really good quality. There's nothing I can see that would put it in a position where I go, I'd be worried about that. I'd say it's amazing.
And the price, it's about $800.
US dollars. That's insane for a
US
full
dollars.
carbon frame. And it looks great. I think they've done a great job with the lines and the aesthetic. I'm a fan of the paint job.
I'm not too sure of the paint. You can get loads of different paint jobs. I'm not too sure of the paint job personally. It's got that kind of, I don't know, that effect in
Ice
it.
effect, yeah. Well, I'd say it's unique nonetheless. But I think, to be honest, for $800 US with a paint color of your choice, right? You can choose the color out the factory, and with the finish on it, I'd be super happy to have something like this. Might
be a little bit more for this paint finish, I think, but like some sometimes you pay $800 more for a specific like limited edition colour from some brands, don't you?
Project One from Trek and various others. Even it's UDH compatible. So we've got, you know, T-type transmission compatibility, as well as not having a specific derailleur hanger for the frame. So again, it's universal. It's something that you can fit with whichever components suit. So you can put top-end RockShox, top-end Fox, and on paper it's so similar to any other brand, you know?
I mean, how long have people been asking for frame set only options? And this might not be for everyone because it's a lightweight one, but they do full power ones, by the way. But there's lots of people out there that have got parts from older bikes and they want to update them, and it's difficult to buy just frame set only. We should probably talk about the battery as well. This is a Bafang made battery. It is a 410 watt-hour battery.
So it's pretty in line with most other lightweight build options at the moment.
Yeah, and this weighs 2.66 kilos.
That's a really good weight.
Yeah.
And I've said it for a while now. Find a cheaper lightweight EMTB option. They don't really exist.
Well, normally the lightweights end up being more expensive. You get less power and less battery.
For more cost. But that's because weight saving requires a lot more effort. So this is kind of like a really good intro to lightweight. You get a really incredible build if you choose so, and you can still have your lightweight without having to break the bank. I think it's a good market disruptor.
Yeah, awesome. Should we build it?
Let's do it.
Or shall you build it?
I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, very carefully, just before we get the seat post in. I think it looks amazing already.
So what is your order if you were building something? Because I'm intrigued, because I might do it slightly different to you. So what would you do?
So using the logic of trying to put the most awkward bits in first, generally recommend getting all your frame routing bits in there, so any cables. So first and foremost, probably put the brake hose in there, run that through the frame and up to the top there, and basically get any cabling or any awkward things in there first before we're putting the motor and the battery in there, just to save having to wiggle around and try and get into any awkward spaces above the motor and the battery.
So these are quite fiddly sometimes to route the rear brake. So have you got any tips that you'd use to try and thread it through?
There are different frame tools you can use. There's a park tool, frame routing tool. But generally, when you've got a short space like that, you can generally use a light, see in there, get a pick, a spoke, something else like that, where you can catch into the end of the hose and you can just guide it up and through.
So this has not got any cable entry or exit port. So it's got a headset cable routing. Now I want to ask you about this because lots of people like really hate cable routing through the headsets. What's your, as a bike mechanic, what are your thoughts on it?
I think you've kind of got to get on with it and enjoy it as a thing now, because I think it's becoming the standard. You know, with wireless drive chains, there's not as much of a need to have cable entry, especially on, you know, for brake router, for gear cable routing. The argument is, with Across headsets and other brands that are doing a nice exit port, then you can get around it. It's easier to build it yourself and understand how it works than it is to try and recoup through a spaghetti junction of someone else's build. So I think if you do it from the start and you do it right, you can make it simple.
With headset cable routing, what we mean is the headset actually has the exit ports and entry ports for the cables. So instead of having the traditional kind of side exit ports on the frame, this will actually sit on top of the headset top bearing, and the cables will exit through the little holes on there. It's very, very neat, but it does mean it's a little bit fiddlier to like change the rear brake and any kind of maintenance jobs, change your top bearing. Don't have to do it that often, but it just makes those jobs a little bit more fiddly. But everything looks really clean because it all comes out of that little kind of exit port just on the headset top bearing.
Brake hose, and now, without having a motor in place, makes it really nice and easy. So if you've ever got carbon frame or carbon seat post or anything carbon, rather than using normal grease, use this Max Grip carbon assembly paste. That's just to make sure it doesn't bond onto there, and it also means that the seat post won't slip because there's small little granules in there to give it some grip without damaging any of the components. So something I do when I'm ever putting in new cables is always just give the cables a quick clean, because they get stored in all kinds of places and it's just going to lengthen the lifespan of your cables, and it's also going to mean that you get a smoother action, whether it be a shift or a drop a lever every time. So just fitting the speed sensor. And maybe this is where you might not get quite as much finesse.
Yeah, I was thinking with the Bosch bikes, they've actually got a magnet on the rear, haven't they, on the wheel, so you don't even need that cable routing. So this is a bit more old school when it comes to that speed sensor.
A little bit, and I think that, yeah, it makes it very tight otherwise if you were to have it going through the frame. Just connecting the controller up to the battery unit. So just getting all the electrical components and the battery and the motor in. Have a look there, it's a really small charging port, so I think you need to be quite careful with the actual charger, making sure you're not to bend any of the pins. So now we've managed to get all the power cables connected up. I'm going to attach all the battery cables to the motor.
The thing I like about the motor axles is they don't put quite as much stress on the frame itself. It's a through axle that kind of tightens into the motor the other side.
Which is a great idea.
Yeah, it adds a bit more stiffness to it, so there's less flex and less strain on single bolt holes on the carbon frame.
So we've got the shock hardware for the trunnion mount on the upper part. So we're going to put a little bit of grease on the bearing face. It's obviously partly a weather seal, but more importantly, it's actually to hold the hardware in place as we go and put the shock where it needs to be. Now the motor's actually been fit to the frame and it fits and looks really, really fluid, to be honest. But I've got the lower part of the motor casing here, which has got some vents there just for the heat dissipation. But essentially, that's just gonna go in there and complete the kind of the profile of the bike and give that a really nice aesthetic, keeping it looking really, really clean and integrated. Fitting the headset bearings, you can see that we don't actually need to press a cup into the frame. There's already an angled surface for the bearing to sit directly on. It should press in nice and flush. Beautiful. With all that grease, it'll hold the bearing in place nice and flush into there. So we're chucking a set of Continental Crypto tiles front and rear on these tyres. So it's got to chuck some sealant in there and then pop up the bead with a compressor. Tight tyre. Running the SRAM wireless T-type transmission where you've got these XX cassette here to chuck on the wheel. Fitting the fork now, we need to be able to get the steerer cut to the right length and also understand where our cable's going on our cockpit so we can get the headset cable routing correct. Just going to chuck on some of these PT's Monarch grips now. nice to be able to take time and get the bike finished and all those little perfect details sorted. So cable routing, amazing. We're going to fit our 32 tooth chainring onto the crank there, and we've got our race face era carbon cranks to put on.
Okay, build basically done, no pedals.
Pretty much there. How much do you reckon it weighs?
I think if it comes under 20 kilos, I'll be really surprised, but very happy about it. So it's not the lightest build in terms of downhill tyres and Fox 38, but let's give it a go.
Only time will tell.
Under 19 kilos.
What?
That is really impressive.
That's very impressive.
So I've got to say, I think it looks really nice. I was looking at it whilst you were building it. Thank you, you've done an amazing job.
It's incredible. It looks amazing. I think the lines are great. With building it, it was actually all right. Things went together quite well. There's always going to be niggles with building electric bikes. You know, motors have cabling, and as we've seen at Eurobike, is most brands don't actually consider battery and cable routing into the motor in terms of frame design. So there's a few brands thinking of it now. So again, it was pretty similar to most other builds, I'd say, in terms of an e-bike. There's little extras that you might not find. There's no carbon sleeves for cable routing. There's a few things which aren't those nuanced details, extras that you might get on a higher end frame from another brand, but arguably, I'd say the quality doesn't really differ.
Interesting. And I think with the Fox 38 170 travel, it's given it like a 63.5 degree head angle.
Which is
so it's
insane.
170, 150 out the rear. Got these nice little race face era cranks, and the motor and the battery, it's got quite a low profile to it, hasn't it? It doesn't look like bulbous or anything, which you would expect with a lightweight bike.
I tell you what I was really impressed with is in terms of design, everything had been designed around the motor in terms of how it fit in, the casing, everything looks really, really well integrated. Like you said, the profile of the design it's all been built and fit to look amazing. I'd say that there's actually probably a lot of comparable lighter weight or even full power builds which might not even look as slick as that.
Yeah, I don't think it looks like a DIY e-bike at all. I think it looks like a well finished, slick product. A couple of things I've noticed: you can't get a very long dropper insertion. So this is is this a 210?
That is a 210, so it is a particularly long dropper. It's the one-up 210, and it ends up kind of bottoming out about there.
And that's slammed, isn't it? You can't get it any lower than that.
Yeah, and that's running top of the crank, center of the crank to the top of the sleeve at 54, was it you said?
Something like that. It's really high for me. Yeah. I think that would get in the way, so I'd end up like putting a shorter dropper on it, I think, so I could get it down a little bit more. But other than that, I think the build is actually pretty sick. I think it's quite a nice looking, it's a cheap build in terms of buying the frame and the motor. We've got some expensive kit on it.
Yeah,
and these are bits that I've had in the studio. They are test kits that the brands have sent in. So, we fit what we had to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be built to this spec, but I'm super impressed with what we've got out of it. Like a sub 19 kilo, 75 Newton meter e-bike with a 430 battery.
And I mean, relatively, it was all quite plug and play. I think the fear of fitting a motor and all those components to a lot of people could be quite scary. Obviously, cables you need to be careful with. I'll admit to say that we actually almost ended up catching a cable inside where the battery charging point is. But ultimately, you can customize it. I'm so happy with the cable routing. I did just want to mention that. So everything fit together beautifully. It looks really, really slick. I think there's a few changes that you could make if you wanted to. It came with a much bigger chainring.
It's like a 38 tooth chainring, which is massive, isn't it?
But again, it depends on the use and type of bike. I'm just really keen to see how it rides.
Yeah, well, we're going to be doing that in the next video. So if you want to see how it rides, subscribe, because that'll be coming real soon. Yeah, and super intrigued as to how it rides out on the trail and the motor and how it performs against some of the crazy expensive bikes that are out there.
Yeah, and I mean, how much did it weigh? 18.9? Drop the mic, surely, right?
It's amazing. Well, thanks for your build, and yeah, subscribe if you want to see us riding it next. Cheers.
No, it was a screen. Where's one bolt? Oh, yeah.
Cheers, buddy.
So we've got the crown race for the headset. We have to run all these cables just over here. This guy. Outtakes. They're fine, Rob. They're fine, I swear. We've got a little bit of thread lock on all of our... It's going so well.
Sorry.
I wasn't even getting the bolt, wasn't even threading in properly.